106. Let's get to Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which is written and directed by Rian Johnson. Stars Daisy Ridley, John Boyega. I mean, basically the whole same cast from the first one. And the synopsis is Rey develops her abilities with the help of Luke Skywalker as the Resistance prepares for battle against the First Order. So, again, if you want to hear a full uninterrupted review of this whole trilogy plus the standalone films, you can go to filmbuds.bandcamp.com, our bonus show page, and donate $1 to the show and you'll get that. So I highly recommend you do that, and it just goes to help keep the show up and going. So would appreciate it, and thanks to all those who have. So I had seen most of Rian Johnson's films up to this point, like Looper, Brick, and I didn't love any of those. I think Knives Out is still by far his best movie. I think it's an amazing film, so I would check that out if you haven't seen it. And I actually interviewed his brother, the composer, for most of his movies on the Music Buds podcast, which is my other show that I haven't been doing much recently, but that interview is there if you're curious. And so direction-wise or director-wise, I wasn't like super hyped. I was like, okay, cool. It's someone kind of different for this. Didn't know much about the story or anything else. It was the sequel, and I liked Force Awakens, so I'm there. And I think that, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. So comment if you're in a situation where you can comment and let me know what you think of the movie. I know that there are very differing opinions on this one. Some people say it's like the worst one. Others say it's the best one, which, spoiler, I'm in that zone. I think this is by far the best of the three. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but while, yes, it does carry some things from Empire Strikes Back story-wise, I think this is by far the most inventive, the most refreshing, the most in its own world and trying to do something different. Not that it totally succeeds or it's entirely original, but I think that whenever I watch this, I feel like I'm watching something that is trying to be different from a lot of other Star Wars films. And I think Rian Johnson's direction and writing very solid. The opening sequences with Rey and Mark Hamill, some of the best parts of the movie. I think the creatures that he gets and drinks the blue milk from, amazing. Love that, where he is on that long stick or pole and he like flies from one part of the cliff to the other. Love that. So I think the whole look of that island and their conversations as to who he is now and then who she's trying to become and trying to find her way. I think all of that really works and is very compelling. Emotional, and those performances are awesome. Mark Hamill is great in this, I think. But before I get into some other good things, I think the biggest issue, I think with this and with Rise of Skywalker, is Oscar Isaac's storyline. I don't mind him at all. I love Oscar Isaac in general. But I remember having watched one of the making of documentaries for this where they're saying Oscar Isaac's character was originally supposed to be killed off in the first, but Oscar Isaac was like, please don't do that. I want to stay on. Please find a way. And so then he carried on through these next two movies. And I think nothing against him. That's fine. I'd want to be in more Star Wars too. But this one especially, I feel like he has nothing to do. And I think that the spaceship sequences where it's the sort of political things with the First Order, I think is the worst part of the movie. It feels like the pacing and energy, momentum just comes to a halt in those sequences. And so I wish that they had killed him off, respectfully, to Oscar Isaac. I think that part should have been way, if not entirely cut, at least limited, because it kind of bloats the movie and it cuts away from things that I actually really care about. And I just don't care that much about Oscar Isaac's group of characters he's interacting with in that, especially in this movie. It's not as bad in Rise of Skywalker, but I think it's not great in this. And so most of the stuff in this that takes place in space, like off planet, I don't love. But that's really one of my only issues with the whole thing. One thing I do love is Snoke. I know some people don't like Snoke. I think the look of Snoke, Andy Serkis's performance is awesome. I think the look of the Red Room is amazing. One of the best visuals of the whole movie, and that lightsaber fight or just overall combat fight in the Red Room is fantastic. So huge fan of anything that takes place there. And Snoke's conversations with Kylo Ren and Kylo Ren sort of failing and all that anger that erupts from that. And I think that in dealing with Rey and Luke, those teachings, like the Jedi teachings, are great. I think there's some good humor there, like with the little blade of grass is hilarious. The Citizen Kane cinematography moment with the mirror images of Rey is great. And her sort of visions of the dark side, I think, is all very effective, but sadly it doesn't really work in the last movie. So it makes this one a little bit more frustrating because they didn't fully carry through on that, at least in how I wanted it to be, and taking risks. The stuff towards the end, the main fight where there's the White Sands fight and the ships are flying over with the red, like kicking up the red dust or the trails, looks fantastic. So like there are so many things that really stick out to me, and especially comparing it to J.J. Abrams's work, which is 7 and 9, I think it's eons better than his visually. But actually, before I forget, one thing I don't love, another sequence, is the casino like horse race thing with John Boyega. That's just something that goes on a little too long. I don't think that there's really enough uncovered there. I like the scene with Benicio del Toro. He's amazing in this, as he always is. I love that character and the design of the character. But that one is another piece. I'm like, that could have been cut down, maybe even taken out, switched around. So the overall film, lengthwise, it is too long, I think. There are points where, just as in Force Awakens, I'm like, all right, let's get this running. Let's wrap this part up. So a little bloated, but still very, very satisfying, very emotionally resonating, very funny, very compelling and intense with action. And so there aren't huge flaws. There aren't anything that I'm like, this is terrible. I don't really understand why people trash on this one so much. I really don't. Please explain it to me if you're one of those people. And especially in comparison to 7 and 9, I just don't see a real comparison there, but maybe I'm nuts. Oh, and actually, last thing, the dream or flashback sequence with Luke and Kylo, like young Kylo, I really like that. And I guess I will talk about it as well in the episode 9 review, but the biggest story disappointment, and I don't really blame Rian Johnson. I think he did all he could with what he was given. But in 9 especially, I hate what they do with Rey and the cop-outs with what they could have done with that character. And I'll go into more detail with the next review, but I really don't like that, and it makes episode 9 all the more frustrating. So I think it's in some ways underrated. This movie is one of my favorite, probably top 3, at least top 5 Star Wars films, and I highly recommend it. Give it another chance. So that one is a heavy 4.5 out of 5.